I've got 15 sci-fi movies from the 80s so deliciously bonkers, you kind of have to go with these movies would never get made today. I'm pretty sure you've seen half of those, but there's a couple you've definitely missed back in the day. That's how obscure they are. 1984. Someone decided to make a sci-fi musical comedy about aliens who land on Earth looking for the origins of rock and roll. There's some local teens who get caught up with these aliens, and the whole thing is trying to be a parody of 1950s beach movies but with new wave music. Except it also has a chainsaw-wielding killer and a tentacled lake monster, and it just keeps piling on more and more bizarre subplots until nothing makes sense anymore. The movie got panned when it came out. Bad acting, incoherent plot, cheap effects, the whole package. But here's what's amazing, the actors knew exactly what they were making. Mark Jackson played one of the alien band members, and years later he said he hoped the movie would be mocked by as many people as possible. He wanted it to become a cult favorite. His band actually broke up after the film flopped, but they've embraced what it became, and in some interviews they even apologized for it. One of them said he'd like to apologize for any money their friends abroad wasted by enduring this film. Lisa Morton sold her first screenplay and watched Hollywood tear it apart. The movie that got made, Meet the Hollowheads, is this nightmare version of a 1950s sitcom set in a tube-filled future where appliances have tentacles and everything's covered in slime. A family tries to have dinner with the dad's boss and it goes catastrophically wrong. There's a scene where the mother wrestles a phallic tentacle in the kitchen, a pet eyeball on a stalk, a rubber chicken trombone, just relentless weirdness. Morton's talked about what happened. Producers re-edited the whole thing, added a rap song she never wanted over the titles, made changes she didn't intend. She said that the final product was heavily re-edited and kind of disappointing. The cast went all in anyway. There's young Juliette Lewis, Bobcat Goldthwait playing a cop, everyone acting like they're in a normal sitcom while surrounded by tentacles. I've never seen anything like it. This one is a Texas sci-fi movie ripping off Terminator and RoboCop. A police robot activates early, goes rogue, and starts killing people, and now a mustachioed cop scientist has to stop it. The screenwriter wrote it as a satire called Blue Steel, but the filmmakers made it straight. He disowned it later, said they made a complete hash of his intentional parody. What's really funny here is that the movie's titled after the robot, and it waits 36 minutes before showing you the robot. Over half an hour into R.O.T.O.R, you finally meet R.O.T.O.R. He's a guy in sunglasses, and he's defeated by honking a car horn at him. That's the threat the whole movie's been building to. A man vulnerable to Honda Civics. Before that, you get a robot assistant, a dancing janitor, endless pseudo-scientific jargon, dubbing errors throughout. Critics called the robot action less than useless, said it was one of the least likable action films of the decade. The only way to enjoy it is if you love terrible movies. The credited director of Space Mutiny left halfway through production for a family emergency and handed it to an assistant. You can tell, this South African space opera was trying to be Star Wars on a budget that could maybe afford one fighter. The story's about a mutiny on a colony spaceship. Beefy pilot Reb Brown teams up with the captain's daughter to stop it. The space effects are stolen from Battlestar Galactica. Interior scenes were shot in a warehouse. The big chases use golf carts. Background explosions happen for no reason. Every fight ends with someone falling over a railing. But there's one moment that defines the whole production. A female crew member gets killed, dies on screen. Next scene, she's at her post working. Nobody notices. She resurrected between scenes and the film just kept going. Mystery Science Theater featured it in an episode, and that's the only reason anyone remembers it exists, and the LA Times called it one of the worst sci-fi movies of its era. Attack of the Super Monsters was cobbled together from a 1977 Japanese TV series. Talking dinosaurs want to take over Earth. Brother and sister with bionic powers merge into a cyborg to stop them. Standard Saturday morning cartoon stuff. Except the humans are two-dimensional animation and the dinosaurs are guys in rubber suits filmed live action. They just edited these two completely different types of footage together and called it a movie. For 83 minutes, you watch cartoon kids fight rubber T-Rexes with laser eyes, giant telepathic bats, a pterodactyl that mind controls pets. Each segment self-contained. New monster, new battle, nothing connects. The whole movie has to be seen to be believed. Watching 2D animation interact with man-in-suit monsters for an hour and a half breaks something in your brain. There's this movie called Alien Private Eye that was filmed in 1987 but didn't come out until 1989 in Europe and 1990 in North America. And when you watch it, you immediately understand why nobody wanted to release it. The plot is that there's this alien detective from the planet Styx named Lemro who set up a private eye business on Earth. He wears a trench coat and talks in 1940s detective cliches. At one point, he literally breakdances in his living room to impress a girl. The plot, and I use that word generously, involves Lemro investigating some alien drug that's hit the streets. This leads to kung fu fights, nightclub shootouts, and a sex scene where mid-action you discover that Lemro has pointed Vulcan ears. The movie is terrible. The acting is terrible, the script is terrible, nobody in this thing knows what they're doing. The whole thing was the brainchild of Vic Rubenfeld, who wrote it, produced it, and directed it. After Alien Private Eye, his Hollywood career basically died. He got one TV show in the 90s called Early Edition, and then he vanished from Hollywood completely. Vicious Lips is what happens when someone decides to make a sci-fi musical exploitation film on basically no money. It was directed by Albert Pyun, who you might know from The Sword and the Sorcerer and later Cyborg. The plot is that there's this all-girl rock band called Vicious Lips who are on their way to this big intergalactic gig when they crash land on a desert alien planet. And that's basically just an excuse for Mad Max costumes and weird hallucinatory sequences. The band wanders around these surreal hallways, encounters a slimy alien monster in the dark, and performs synth rock songs. There's a three-breasted mutant dancer in this movie, years before Total Recall did the same thing. By any normal standard, it's not a good movie. The acting is amateur, the story barely exists, it's full of 80s kitsch and just completely ridiculous. But the backstory makes it kind of impressive. Pyun had his budget vanish right before shooting. Most of it just disappeared. He was left with $100,000 and a 7-day shooting schedule. Most directors would have quit. Pyun shot the entire thing in that week anyway. He talked about it years later and said it represented the triumph of imagination in the unlikeliest circumstances. Rowdy Roddy Piper, the wrestler, plays Sam Hell, one of the last fertile men left after a nuclear apocalypse. Most men are sterile now, so a female-run government conscripts him to go into Frogtown, which is exactly what it sounds like. A settlement run by mutant frog people. Sam's got to rescue a group of fertile women for repopulation purposes. To make sure he cooperates, they put an explosive chastity device on him. So Roddy Piper has to battle 7-foot humanoid toads while wearing a bomb on his junk. The mutant frogs are actually pretty impressive considering the budget. Some of them are full costumes, some are puppets, and they clearly put real effort into making them look weird. There are gun battles, campy one-liners, and plenty of nudity. One character spends most of the movie in lingerie carrying a machine gun. Nobody involved was trying to make Blade Runner. But within its own insane parameters, it commits. It even spawned a couple of direct-to-video sequels, which tells you there was an audience for this. People wanted more frog mutants and post-apocalyptic sex comedy. In 1984, someone decided to make a Star Wars parody on basically no money, and the main villain was a guy wearing a literal bucket on his head. The movie's called Gremloids in the UK, Hyperspace in the US. The plot involves this villain named Lord Buckethead, like Darth Vader, except his helmet is actually just a bucket. He invades a small town on Earth because his navigation system screwed up and he thinks he landed on a distant planet. He's looking for a princess, ends up kidnapping a waitress from a local diner by mistake. There's this nerdy guy named Max and his robot sidekick trying to stop the invasion, and the whole thing plays out like a live-action cartoon. It's a complete throwaway movie, Should have disappeared completely, but here's where it gets real good. In the UK, this video distributor named Mike Lee released the film and apparently liked the Lord Buckethead character so much that he made his own costume and decided to run for Parliament. In 1987, as Lord Buckethead, on a joke platform obviously, he got a few hundred votes and everyone had a good laugh. Then 2017 happens. Someone else revives the character and runs Lord Buckethead against Prime Minister Theresa May in the general election. Full space regalia shows up on live TV. The whole thing goes viral worldwide. I don't think there's another movie in history where a character from a forgotten B-movie ended up on a real ballot. That's the legacy of Gremloids. Universal Pictures had Andy Kaufman under contract and they needed to figure out what to do with him. Kaufman was this weird, eccentric comedian who nobody quite knew how to package for mainstream audiences. So the studio decided to put him in a family-friendly robot romance movie. Heartbeeps is about two service robots who fall in love and run away together. They're in this futuristic facility, they develop emotions, they escape into the woods and build a little robot child together. Then they spend the rest of the movie wandering around trying to avoid this clunky robot police unit that's chasing them. The concept sounds sweet, maybe even charming. The execution was a complete disaster. Stan Winston did the makeup effects, the guy who later did Terminator and Jurassic Park, and the robot designs actually looked good. That was the only good part. Everything else was just Kaufman in robot makeup wandering around aimlessly. The movie got a 0 on some review aggregates. It was nominated for multiple Razzies including Worst Picture. Even Andy Kaufman knew it was terrible. He went on Late Night with David Letterman and apologized to viewers. He offered to personally refund anyone's ticket money if they'd seen Heartbeeps. In 1982, somebody pitched a movie about an elite fighting team with high-tech weapons and vehicles. G.I. Joe type stuff, but with more lasers. Barry Bostwick plays the leader, Commander Ace Hunter, and he's wearing a gold jumpsuit and headband for the entire runtime. The plot is that some tyrant's invading a peaceful country and Megaforce shows up to stop him. That's basically it. There's no character development, nobody changes or grows. It's just explosions and stunts and guys in spandex. The whole thing ends with Ace winking at the camera saying the good guys always win, even in the 80s. Even by 1982 standards, the cheese was too thick. It got 0% on Rotten Tomatoes and bombed hard at the box office. People were calling it a feature-length toy commercial, and they weren't wrong. There were Megaforce action figures and an Atari game that came out alongside it. It's like the cheesiest sci-fi action movie possible, and that's probably why it even has this cult following now. This movie starts as a standard Conan ripoff. Blonde barbarian guy, prehistoric world, fighting dinosaurs in rubber suits. You've seen this before. About halfway through, R.O.T.O.R kills a giant bat, guts it, and uses the corpse as a hang glider to attack a village, which is already pretty out there, but you're still watching a caveman adventure movie at this point. And then the third act happens and the entire film goes completely off the rails. R.O.T.O.R stumbles into this high-tech compound with lasers and androids, and it turns out the whole prehistoric world is post-apocalyptic. The cavemen are descendants of nuclear war survivors, and there's still this faction of technocrats running around with sci-fi weapons. So the climax is R.O.T.O.R, the caveman, picking up a laser rifle and storming a space fortress. The movie starts with dinosaurs and ends with Star Wars. It just abandons its entire premise and becomes a different film. Roger Corman made a lot of cheap sci-fi in the 80s, but Galaxy of Terror is the one that people still can't stop talking about. Not because it's good, though it's actually better than it has any right to be, but because of one scene that completely overshadowed everything else in the movie. There's a rescue mission to a hostile planet, standard setup. The crew starts dying in increasingly disturbing ways as their fears manifest. Still pretty normal for this kind of movie. Then a woman gets attacked by a giant maggot, and when I say attacked, I mean it in the worst possible way. The UK had to cut 14 seconds from the VHS release. Other countries just removed the scene entirely. That moment has defined this movie for 40 years. Everyone who knows B-movie horror calls it the worm movie. That's its legacy. You can talk about how the sets are actually well made, how the performances are solid, how the story's a decent psychological horror, and all of that's true, but it doesn't matter. One scene was so extreme that it became the only thing anyone remembers, and that's why you couldn't make Galaxy of Terror today. That scene would kill the production before it even finished shooting. Someone in Canada decided to make an adult animated musical about mutant animal people in a post-apocalyptic America. There's an aging rock star and they try to summon a demon using a singer's voice. They got Cheap Trick, Debbie Harry, Lou Reed, and Iggy Pop to do the music. They put over 300 animators on it. They spent $8 million, then went $3 million over budget. The animation quality was genuinely impressive for 1983. Then MGM saw it and hated the main character's voice actor. They made the studio redub most of his dialogue, cut scenes, change the ending. The version that got released wasn't even the movie they'd made. It opened in a handful of theaters and made $30,000 total. Rock and Roll nearly bankrupted the studio that created it, got butchered by its American distributor, and vanished immediately. The original cut didn't surface until 2005, and even that came from a VHS tape because the film print had been destroyed in a fire. So this beautifully animated, well-scored sci-fi musical about demon summoning rock stars basically doesn't exist in the form it was meant to. What survived was the compromised version that nobody wanted to see. The first Critters made decent money as a Gremlins knockoff, so they gave a first-time director named Mick Garris $4 million to make a sequel. This time, residents of some small town find a batch of alien eggs and mistake them for Easter eggs. They realize their mistake when the eggs hatch and carnivorous furballs start eating everyone. It's set 2 years after the original, brings back the kid from the first movie, and the budget let them make the effects look better. The critters themselves looked better, the gore was better, everything was just a notch up from the first one. Made about $4 million at the box office, which was less than the original but enough that it became the last Critters movie to get a theatrical release. Everything after went straight to video,